Christmas is a cultural phenomenon, a unique holiday that billions of people worldwide consider the coziest and most home-centered celebration of the year. We know its fundamental story. It is the celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. However, when we start to examine its customs, we're in for a surprise. Why do we put up and decorate a tree in our living room? Why do we hang stockings? And how did this story suddenly turn into a tale about a bearded man flying from the North Pole on a sleigh pulled by flying reindeer? These traditions are so familiar that we don't question them. But when you do ask the question, it becomes obvious. Christmas is a mosaic assembled from pieces of Christian faith, Roman debauchery, and dark Scandinavian mysticism. Today, we are going on a journey through millennia to unravel the true history of the holiday. Long before Christianity appeared, midwinter was a time of existential fear and vital celebration. It was a period when people tried to bring back the sun and ensure the survival of their kin. Across different cultures, rituals of light, fire, and renewal emerged around the longest night of the year, mixing astronomical observations with fertility magic. In Northern Europe, around the winter solstice, approximately December 21st, people celebrated Yule, Old Norse All. Not just a single day, but a season of 12 nights featuring feasts, sacrificial rites, blot, and mandatory toasts to a good year and the harvest. Even in the sagas and the works of Snorri Sturluson, Yule is described as a time when one must drink ale and give thanks for the brightening year. A central symbol in many European regions was the Yule log. It was brought into the house, lit from a piece of last year's log, and kept burning as long as possible. According to folk omens, the number of sparks and crackles predicted how many calves, piglets, or lambs would be born in the spring. Similar beliefs were recorded by folklorists from Scandinavia to Britain and France. The fire served as a metaphor for the sun returning after conquering the darkness. Even the ash from the log was considered protective. It was scattered over fields and mixed into fodder to ensure the health of livestock. Evergreens, spruce, yew, holly, ivy, mistletoe, were brought indoors as living proof of life's unceasing force. The Roman author Pliny the Elder mentioned the veneration of mistletoe by the Celts. While modern historians are cautious about his account, the custom of decorating with winter greenery was deeply rooted in Northern Europe and later organically flowed into Christmas wreaths and garlands. The decorated Christmas tree is a later tradition of the modern era, 16th century Germany. But its symbolism grew out of these ancient concepts of evergreen plants as amulets against death and the cold. Yule was a time of a mythical reset of the world, hence the figures of the wild hunt, Vildejagd. In Germanic Scandinavian traditions, it was led by Odin, also known by the name Mjolnir, the Yule One. It was believed that during the 12 nights, or Rauhnekta, smoke nights, the veil between worlds was thin. Spirits and ancestors roamed the sky, and humans had to observe taboos, such as smoking out their homes and avoiding spinning wool. Some images of Yule are reflected in later winter figures. The Yule goat, Jolbok, a straw goat serving as a protective symbol and a participant in masquerades. Sometimes it was this goat that brought gifts in Scandinavia before the victory of the Santa Claus image. The Yule boar. In Iceland and Scandinavia, there was a rite of sacrificing a boar to Freyr, the god of fertility. Oaths for the coming year were sworn on its bristles. Today, we see echoes of this in the Christmas ham, juleskinka, and lucky marzipan pigs. Finally, a popular pop culture bridge, Odin on his 8-legged horse Sleipnir, flying through the winter night, and Santa with his 8 reindeer. This image of Santa appeared in the 19th century thanks to the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas. While a direct link isn't proven, the parallels are striking. In the Roman Empire, December was a time of massive festivities. Saturnalia kicked off on December 17th, eventually stretching to the 23rd, and effectively set the tone for seasonal debauchery right up to the calends of January. What happened during Saturnalia?
Hey, Sheldon, are you and Leonard putting up a Christmas tree? No, because we don't celebrate the ancient pagan festival of Saturnalia.
Saturnalia?
Gather round, kids. It's time for Sheldon's beloved Christmas special.
In the pre-Christian era, as the winter solstice approached and the plants died, pagans brought evergreen boughs into their homes as an act of sympathetic magic, intended to guard the life essences of the plants until spring. This custom was later appropriated by Northern Europeans, and eventually it becomes the so-called Christmas tree.
Role reversal. Masters served their slaves. A mock king of Saturnalia, a chaotic ruler whose commands were obeyed in jest, was elected. This figure would later be reimagined in the medieval Lord of Misrule. Gambling and feasting. Public gambling was permitted only during this period, accompanied by toasts and the cry, Io Saturnalia. Gifts. People exchanged wax candles, cerai, and small clay figurines, sigillaria. Candles culturally fed the light during the darkest season. The pileus, a hat symbolizing freedom, worn even by freeborn citizens to emphasize the inverted order. Following Saturnalia came the kalends of January, Roman New Year, featuring the exchange of strenae, New Year's gifts, house visits, and decorating with greenery. Many customs of the Middle Ages, carnival processions and masquerades, are rooted in this seasonal pairing. Emperor Aurelian established the cult of the invincible sun, Sol Invictus, in 274 AD, dedicating a temple to it in Rome. Regarding Mithras and the invincible sun, Mithraism was a mystery cult popular among soldiers. While there was an association between Mithras and Sol Invictus, they are not the same. The popular claim that Mithras was born on December 25th in a cave with shepherds is partially controversial. The image of birth from a rock is indeed Mithric, but the exact tie to December 25th and shepherds isn't confirmed by all sources. However, the festival of Natalis Invicti, birthday of the unconquered, is reliably attested on this date. In the early centuries, Christianity didn't place much importance on Christ's birthday. The main event was the resurrection, Easter. Early writers like Origen explicitly stated that birthdays were pagan customs for figures like Pharaoh or Herod, not for saints. But everything changed after Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire in 380 AD. The church faced a mass influx of converts who weren't planning to give up their age-old festivals like Saturnalia, Yule, and sun cults. The church leaders faced a practical question: ban and persecute, or adapt and reimagine? When did December 25th appear? The first known mention of Christmas on December 25th is in a Roman document from the mid-4th century, the Chronography of 354. It lists December 25th, Christ born in Bethlehem, Judea. Right next to it in the same calendar is the pagan festival Natalis Invicti. This means that by the mid-4th century, December 25th was already a double date in Rome. There are two theories on the origin of the date. Theory 1, competition with paganism. The church consciously chose December 25th to Christianize a popular pagan holiday. This is a classic strategy of religious assimilation. Instead of banning folk festivities, which could have caused resistance, the church offered a new meaning for the old date. As Pope Gregory the Great put it in a letter to missionaries in Britain in the late 6th century, "Do not destroy pagan temples. Turn them into churches. Do not ban festive feasts. Let them become Christian celebrations in honor of martyrs." The same principle was applied to dates. The cult of the invincible sun, Sol Invictus, was transformed into the worship of the Son of God, the Son of Righteousness, an expression from the book of Malachi 4:2, which Christians applied to Christ. This theory has strong support among historians. The context of the 4th century, when Christianity was consolidating as the state religion, indeed favored such substitution strategies. Church authors of that time directly spoke of Christ as the true Son. Theory 2, symbolic calculation. An alternative explanation is based on internal Christian logic. Early theologians believed in the integral age of prophets and the righteous. The idea that great figures died on the same day they were conceived or born. By the 3rd century, Christians had established the date of the crucifixion as March 25th. In the Eastern tradition, April 6th. If this logic is applied to the conception of Christ, the Annunciation, when Archangel Gabriel appeared to Mary, then counting 9 months of pregnancy from March 25th results in December 25th. The North African theologian Tertullian, circa 200 AD, and other early authors indeed contemplated the date of conception. This theory demonstrates that the choice of December 25th could have had an internal theological logic, independent of pagan holidays. Which theory is correct? Most likely, both worked simultaneously. The symbolic calculation provided the theological justification, while the coincidence with the winter solstice and Sol Invictus made the date strategically convenient for mass Christianization. The Church skillfully combined internal symbolism with external missionary pragmatism. However, the actual historical date of Jesus' birth is unknown. The Gospels indicate neither the day nor the month. The mention of shepherds in the field even leads some researchers to doubt a winter birth, as shepherds in Judea usually led their flocks into shelters during the winter. But for the early church, literal accuracy was less important than liturgical and symbolic truth. Christ is the light of the world, born on the darkest night of the year, transforming symbols from pagan charms to Christian signs. Holly and ivy, originally pagan protective plants. Holly, with its thorns and red berries, was reinterpreted by the Church as the crown of thorns and drops of Christ's blood. Ivy became a symbol of the soul's attachment to God. Mistletoe, a sacred plant of the Druids, believed to grant fertility. The Church was suspicious of it and often banned it from churches. However, the tradition of kissing under it survived in folk culture. Evergreens, reinterpreted as a symbol of eternal life through Christ. Gifts. The Church linked gift-giving to the Magi, bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Throughout the Middle Ages, Christmas looked nothing like the quiet family holiday we know today. It was a time of noisy, drunken, and often violent carnival, a period when the social order was inverted. Christmas lasted not 1 day, but 12 days, from December 25th to Epiphany on January 6th. In England and Europe, a Lord of Misrule was elected, or the Abbot of Unreason in Scotland. This character, a direct heir to the Roman King of Saturnalia, led the revelry, buffoonery, and parody rituals. Medieval Christmas was a time of carnival inversion. Servants might sit at the master's table. The Feast of Fools was held in cathedrals, where a boy bishop would parody church services. Church authorities viewed these customs with ambivalence. On one hand, the carnival acted as a safety valve for social tension. It was deemed better to let the people run wild once a year than to let discontent fester. On the other hand, many bishops and theologians condemned the excesses. In 1444, the University of Paris officially condemned the Feast of Fools, calling it a scandal for the Church. Yet the custom persisted for centuries. An important part of the carnival were mummers, groups of people in masks and costumes who went door to door, performing comic plays, such as the drama of St. George and the Dragon or the death and resurrection of a hero, and demanding treats or money. Sometimes mummers dressed as animals, bears, deer, goats, or as wild men covered in straw or leaves, harking back to ancient agrarian and zoomorphic rituals. In Wales, there was the tradition of Mari Lwyd, a procession featuring a horse's skull on a pole decorated with ribbons. The skull would bite spectators, while the participants sang provocative songs, demanding to be let into the house for drinks. Wassailing, from the Old English Wes Hal, be well, wasn't just cute caroling. It was a form of ritual extortion. Groups of young, often intoxicated men would bang on the doors of the wealthy. If the host wasn't generous with food and drink, they might publicly shame him, damage his property, or even start a riot. Historian Stephen Nissenbaum calls this a form of moral economy, the poor reminding the rich of their duty to share. But by the 18th century, as urbanization grew, this system broke down, and wassailing turned into street violence. Beyond wassailing, there were lighting bonfires in the streets, sometimes blocking traffic, firing guns and setting off firecrackers, especially in rural areas. Noisy processions with drums, trumpets, and bells that disturbed the public order. If you had lived in London or Paris in the 16th or 17th centuries, you would have been more likely to dread encountering a drunken mob of mummers than to joyfully await a visit from Santa Claus. The police and the City Watch actively patrolled the streets during the Christmas season, trying to contain the chaos. The Puritans, a radical Protestant movement that emerged in 16th century England, aimed to purify the church of all unbiblical elements. For them, Christmas was the focal point of all sins. Their primary objections included lack of biblical foundation, the sola scriptura principle. There is no command in the Bible to celebrate the birth of Christ. Puritans believed that Christians should observe only what is explicitly prescribed by Scripture, and therefore considered Christmas a human invention. Pagan origins. The Puritans were historically aware. They saw Christmas as a continuation of Saturnalia, Yule, and sun worship. For them, decorating homes with evergreens, burning the Yule log, and indulging in excessive drinking were all acts of idolatry. Moral debauchery, carnal and sensual delights. The Puritans condemned drunkenness, gluttony, gambling, theater, and dancing, all of which flourished during Christmas celebrations. Preacher Increase Mather, New England, 17th century, referred to Christmas festivities as serving the devil. Catholic character. For the Puritans, Christmas was too closely tied to the Roman Catholic Church, which they viewed as the whore of Babylon. The Reformation had already weakened Christmas in many Protestant countries. In Scotland, the Presbyterians virtually abolished it in the 1560s, and until the 19th century, Hogmanay, New Year's, was more important than Christmas Day. When the Puritans came to power during the English Civil War, they decided to take action. In 1644, Parliament decreed that December 25th should be a day of fasting and repentance, not a celebration. In 1647, an act was passed that officially prohibited the celebration of Christmas. The law prescribed to keep shops and markets open on Christmas Day, to hold no church services beyond that of a normal Sunday, unless December 25th fell on a Sunday, to refrain from decorating homes and holding feasts. Oliver Cromwell, the Lord Protector from 1653, supported these measures. Although the law itself was passed by Parliament and not by Cromwell personally, his figure became the symbol of the man who canceled Christmas. The ban was extremely unpopular. Riots erupted in various parts of England. In Canterbury, 1647, crowds took to the streets demanding the restoration of the holiday. The matter escalated into conflicts with soldiers. In Ipswich, Norwich, and other towns, people defiantly closed their shops and decorated their homes in defiance of the ban. Pamphlets defending Christmas were circulated, including the anonymous treatise, The Vindication of Christmas, 1652, which portrayed Christmas as an old good English gentleman unjustly banished by the Puritans. This resistance demonstrated that Christmas was deeply rooted in popular culture, not so much as a religious holiday, but as a time for feasting, rest, and social solidarity. For peasants and artisans, Christmas was one of the few moments of respite in a hard year. Following Cromwell's death and the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, linked to the return of King Charles II, all Puritan laws were repealed. Christmas was officially reinstated. However, the experience of the ban left a lasting mark. A portion of the population, especially nonconformists, Quakers, Baptists, continued to ignore Christmas as a papist holiday. In Scotland, the Presbyterian Church continued to reject Christmas well into the 20th century. December 25th only became an official public holiday in Scotland in 1958. In the American colonies, particularly in New England, the Puritans also banned Christmas. In Massachusetts, from 1659 to 1681, celebrating Christmas was punishable by a fine of 5 shillings. Even after the law was repealed, many Americans did not celebrate Christmas until the 19th century. The conflict surrounding Christmas was not just religious, it was also socio-political. For Royalists and Anglicans, Christmas symbolized the old, hierarchical, feudal England with its lord's generosity and subjects' loyalty. For Puritans and Republicans, it represented corruption, idolatry, and tyranny, both religious and monarchical. The pamphlet war between the defenders and opponents of Christmas in the 1640s to 1650s was fierce. Satirical engravings appeared. In one, Old Father Christmas was depicted as an exiled old man in rags. In another, a Puritan preacher trampled on a Christmas pudding. Paradoxically, the Puritan persecution of Christmas did not kill the holiday, but changed it. After the Restoration, and especially in the 18th century, Christmas began to lose its aggressive carnival atmosphere and gradually transform into a more private family celebration. This process took another 2 centuries and would only be completed in the Victorian era, which we will discuss later. But it was already clear in the 17th century. Christmas could not remain a wild, popular carnival amidst growing urbanization, bourgeois morality, and state control. By the early 19th century, Christmas was either banned or remained a time of street riots. But the Victorian era saved it, transforming it into the ideal family holiday. Writers such as Charles Dickens carried out a cultural revolution. In his A Christmas Carol, 1843, Dickens did not simply describe Christmas, he reinvented it. He redirected the energy of Christmas, making it a celebration of charity, nostalgia, and family warmth. The perfect antidote to the social alienation and greed spawned by the Industrial Revolution. Dickens was deeply concerned about child poverty and the horrors of child labor. He initially planned to write a political pamphlet, but chose a more effective route: a fairy tale. The Ghost of Christmas Present, which shows Scrooge the children embodying ignorance and want, was his direct social appeal to the wealthy society. The focus shifted to children, recall Tiny Tim, and private, intimate family gatherings, in contrast to the previous public revelry. Christmas became the ideal vehicle for expressing the new family values of the Victorian middle class. Any story where someone is suddenly shamed on Christmas, from the Grinch to Kevin in Home Alone, owes its existence to Dickens. He also helped popularize the greeting itself, Merry Christmas. The most iconic tradition of Christmas tree came from Germany. It is widely believed that the Protestant reformer Martin Luther was the first to decorate an evergreen tree with lit candles, around 1536, to recreate the stars on the night sky he had seen under the moonlight. Earlier 16th century evidence shows that in Strasbourg, fir trees were decorated with apples, wafers, and sweets, symbolizing the tree of paradise from the medieval mystery plays performed during the holy days. Contrary to popular belief, Prince Albert was not the first to bring the Christmas tree to England. This was done by the German wife of George III, Queen Charlotte, who set up a decorated yew tree in Windsor as early as 1800. But the tradition did not become widespread. The tradition became truly popular in England after Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, from the German Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, imported and set up a tree at Windsor Castle. A key turning point was the engraving of the royal family around the Christmas tree, published in the Illustrated London News in 1848. This instantly made the custom mandatory for the entire English-speaking world, becoming a symbol of ideal family life. Initially, Christmas trees were decorated with candles, sweets, paper roses, and small gifts. In the 1880s, due to mass production and the emergence of manufactured ornaments, for example, in Woolworth's stores, Christmas decorations became accessible to the middle class. Modern Santa is the perfect product of cultural compilation, assembled from 3 main figures. Saint Nicholas of Myra was a Greek bishop who lived in the 4th century in modern-day Turkey, known for his generosity. His charitable cult gave rise to the name Santa, derived from the Dutch Sinterklaas. His most famous story tells how he secretly saved a poor man's 3 daughters from prostitution by throwing bags of gold through their window. In some versions, the bags landed in stockings that were hanging by the fireplace to dry, which explains the tradition of Christmas stockings. Odin, the Scandinavian god who flew on his 8-legged horse Sleipnir, gifting those who left food for his steed. A precursor to chimney entries and reindeer snacks. Father Christmas, the English allegory of the holiday representing the spirit of feasting and joy, not originally connected to children. In America, at the beginning of the 19th century, these three figures coalesced into a single character to provide New York with a peaceful, family-oriented symbol of Christmas that would counteract street disturbances. The poet Clement Clarke Moore, in his 1822 poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, better known as "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," created the recognizable image. He transformed the tall bishop or the grim pagan god into a jolly elf, a right jolly old elf, who descends down the chimney. He gave him a flying sleigh and 8 reindeer: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. He cemented the tradition of leaving gifts in stockings, and his characteristic laugh, "Ho, ho, ho." The visual image was solidified by the cartoonist Thomas Nast, who worked for Harper's Weekly magazine starting in 1863. Inspired by Moore's poem and drawing upon the descriptions of a merry and plump Santa, Nast drew him as full-figured, bearded, cheerful, and, most importantly, consistently dressed in a red suit with white fur. He also gave Santa a home at the North Pole and a workshop for producing toys, adding a fairy tale geography to the character. Commercialization, particularly the Coca-Cola advertising campaigns, visualized by artist Haddon Sundblom, in the 1930s, finally made him a global icon. Sundblom drew Santa for Coca-Cola starting in 1931, using his neighbor as a model, making him more human, kinder, and more realistic than Nast's elf-like figures. While Coca-Cola did not invent the red suit, Nast had used it long before them. Their ubiquitous advertising over the decades cemented this exact familiar image of the red, jolly Santa in the global consciousness. But where there is a giver, there is a punisher. In Central Europe, St. Nicholas is accompanied by Krampus, a demonic horned creature who punishes naughty children. This reminds us that the ancient festival always included 2 sides: the light, the giver, and the dark, the punisher, used to enforce order. Ancient traditions still echo in non-Western cultures. Slavic, the badnik, and oak log, is burned in the Balkans to ensure fertility. Baltic, in Lithuania, kuchios, a 12-dish supper is served with an empty place left for deceased relatives. Wales, the custom of Mari Lwyd involves a procession with a horse's skull on a pole. The group challenges homeowners to a battle of rhymes to gain entry and treats. Christmas is a holiday that is constantly being reinvented, yet its power is undeniable. Its strength was such that even during World War I, it compelled mortal enemies in the trenches to lay down their arms and celebrate together. Every gift, every candle, every song is a whisper from the ancient world where light and darkness coexisted. Christmas is more than just a tradition. It is the irresistible power of the human desire to find joy, light, and community in the depths of the darkest winter. If you enjoyed this historical journey, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Until then, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.